Greetings, my brothers and sisters. Sending gratitude to all of you who are joining in today to accompany us down the rabbit hole of self-exploration through plant medicines. My name is Ryan Sprague, and I'm here to tell you that your frequency is now set and tuned to explore psychedelic medicines and the impact they've made among the countless psychonauts exploring the last true frontier. Buy a ticket and take a ride with me as we get true first-hand accounts of the experiences, benefits, risks, and transformations taking place within the ever-expanding world of psychedelic medicines on This One Time on Psychedelics. One thing I mention often on this show that I feel bears repeating is the idea that our lives themselves are a psychedelic experience. For any of you listening to this show right now, I want you to take a trip down memory lane with me as we take a second to think about the many paths we've walked down, the path we've taken a detour from at a certain point, and the path or paths we feel we're walking down currently in our lives, and begin to see how each of them, no matter how independent of one another they may seem, have led us to this moment in time right now. It is by tuning into this type of awareness that we can see the psychedelic nature that our lives truly are, and in doing so, be captivated by the memory of who we were yesterday and the mystery of who we will be tomorrow. Today's guest on the show is a man who, similar to what I stated above, has walked down many different paths in his life that have all allowed him to be who he is today. He is a retired football player for Arizona State, a retired UFC fighter where he fought professionally for 6 years, the former director of human optimization of Onnit, and is now a coach for Fit for Service, which is a tribe focused on practicing vulnerability and serving yourself through service to others. He is the host of the Kyle Kingsbury podcast, which is a show centered around bringing leading minds and voices together to speak to how to achieve peak performance in everyday life. He is a facilitator of sacred hunting experiences through the Sacred Hunting organization, and is using his voice to speak to the importance and potency behind subjects such as nutrition, performance, recovery, longevity, plant medicines, and inner peace, amongst many others. In this episode, we will be diving into his experiences with plant medicines, what they have revealed to him, what his views are on the psychedelic nature of everyday life, the wisdom he has for those of you out there looking to engage in this world, and whatever else the divine wills into action during this epic dialogue we are about to embark upon. So, without further ado, please help me in welcoming the one, the only, Kyle Kingsbury to the show. Kyle, my brother, great to have you here with me today.
That's awesome. That was a hell of an intro, brother. I like
Hell
that.
yeah, dude.
Good homework.
Yes,
It, one take. I like that.
Well, I love doing the intros live because for me, whenever I hear an intro, it's kind of like, oh, wait, that's me. That's really cool. You know, and so like being able to give that gift to others. I learned that from Tom Bilyeu that does impact theory. That dude is an assassin of intros. And so I knew when I started the podcasts, I wanted to do that as well. I say podcast because at first I started one, then this one got started on Bicycle Day last year, which was really cool. But man, I'm super excited to have you here. And we just rocked an amazing episode on your show right before this, so we're in the flow. And how I'd really like to start these is for someone like yourself, right, who's a football player, UFC fighter, not the typical archetype that you would see being a psychedelic proponent, maybe, right, for those listening. How did you first become interested in psychedelics? We'll start there before we actually go through the trajectory of how you started seeing them the way you do now. But how did you get started in this world?
Yeah, I'll dive right into that, and I'll debunk and confirm one of the things you just said. I was chatting with Aaron Rodgers recently, just a name drop, and I was asking him, like, does anybody know about kratom? Does anybody know about this or that? And with psychedelics, you know, he said most of the guys in the NFL, because of the testing policy and all that, are pretty on the straight and narrow, other than cannabis. You know, kratom, anything else, you know, let alone psychedelics. So that fits the bill there. But you'd be surprised how many dudes, especially the retired guys from the UFC, are getting into plant medicines. Blowing my mind, and it's an amazing thing for me to hear, knowing how big of an impact it's been for my life. And also, you know, not trying to psychoanalyze the sport, but you know, if you're getting into that game, likely you've got something that likely could get worked out and made better. And if you're not fighting anymore as an outlet, certainly being alleviating some of that tension that might have been a driving force in your life to fight is a good thing. So I had a boxing coach who was Native American, mestizo, mixed. He was a Mayan elder, and his name was Huitzilin, which was the hummingbird in a Mayan culture. And fucking itty bitty guy, you know, I mean, he's small for a Mexican dude, really small, like 5 foot even, maybe. And so he'd always hold his hands straight up, holding mitts for me, but he could move in all directions, just like a hummingbird, you know, he was crazy on his feet. He probably fought at 105, I want to say, you know, and I fought at 205. So it was a comical size difference, but he would take me and Kane and a lot of the fighters, John Fitch, out to a Native American reservation outside of San Jose to do traditional sweat lodges. And in North America, that's the Onipi. In South America, that's the Temescal. And being on a North American reservation, a lot of them were Inipis, but he built his own before he died, a true Temescal out of concrete blocks. And they're incredible experiences, you know, just absolutely incredible. And they are ceremonies in and of themselves. And, you know, through that long, grueling experience, he would drop wisdom and drop medicine through oral traditions and song. And he'd talk about, you know, the old ways and some of the different techniques from the Vision Quest, no food, no water for 4 days. Sometimes you're just given a knife, sometimes you're given a pillow, sometimes you're given a 16-ounce bottle of water, but that's it. That's all you got for 4 days, you know, and then they come back and find you, and if you're alive, great. If not, you know, they'll look for you. But that seemed always a bit hardcore for me. One of the things that I was drawn to was plant medicines just because, you know, as we spoke about on my podcast, cannabis for me debunked, you know, and cannabis wasn't a gateway drug. Alcohol was. I got an alcohol at 13 and I was like, whoa, this makes me feel totally different. What does this plant do? You know, and they're like, oh, I feel fine the next day after having this plant. What do the other plants do? You know, like, the plant has no fucking repercussions from a hangover standpoint. Maybe I'm onto something, but, you know, it took a while. We really needed to build trust. It's funny because I remember back in the day on Facebook, I was, you know, posted doing the sweat lodge, and it happens a lot now due to woke culture, but somebody was like, you know, you really shouldn't be doing that. That's for my people, this kind of thing. And, you know, I said, it's funny you say that because the woman who runs the entire reservation said that if we don't share this now with the people that are effectively destroying the earth, then our medicine is lost entirely. This medicine must be shared. And it must be shared quickly, especially with those that have the ability to make changes, you know. And he grew up in a different time. He died in his late 50s, my coach, but he told me I was the first white person he ever brought to that reservation. Wow. And I laughed in his face. He's like, "Fuck, you talking about?" It was like, "You're not racist." And he's like, "Well, that took time." He was his whole life, because of his size, he'd get chased down by white people and they beat the fuck out of him. Wow. Especially because he wasn't even really, you know, Mexicans didn't like him either. You know, he was mixed, and he looked different. Clearly looked different. You know, he had a lot of native qualities in his face, and so he really didn't feel like he fit in much with either group. And a lot of racism growing up in California in the time when he grew up. But that's what got him into boxing, you know, and then really got him into the warrior's path and working with plant medicines, and really shaped who he was as a person. And he, you know, he wasn't the perfect curandero, you know, he wasn't the perfect medicine man. He had a lot of faults, and at the same time, so many gifts. You know, one of the things that many people scratch their head at is like, my wife's first ceremony with me, first time doing any ceremony, any medicine, never had anything other than alcohol. And I think one time she got dosed with a weed brownie in college, you know, like on purpose, you know, without consent. So this first experience, I had brought an ounce of golden teacher dried mushrooms, and there were supposed to be five fighters that were all, you know, in the UFC or close to it, coming from AKA. And one by one on this hour and 45-minute drive, I get a phone call. Hey, I can't make it. Sorry, my tire's flat, or I'm just not up for it today. So one by one, all these guys back out, and I get there, and I'm like, it's just us tonight. And this is before, you know, my wife's a trooper. She lived with me in my mom's detached garage for 5 fucking years. Like, I know she'll follow me to the ends of the earth, you know. And clearly wasn't in it for the money and the glory of being a fighter. That's what I'm sure. But I told her, I was like, it's just going to be us. She's like, oh, that's cool, you know, as long as coach should be cool. I was like, yeah, he'd be totally fine. So I go, Weezy. And well, everyone backed out, but I brought a lot, so give us what you think we need, and then take the rest as a gift and a thank you for your time. And he said, okay, and he smiles. And he would split them into pairs for the masculine and feminine, and sage and bless, and the 7 directions prayer, but he'd bless all the medicine. He's got it all laid out. I'm like, this dude, blessing the whole bag? What's going on here? He took one pair for himself, and he had us split the rest. And we're eating these, right? This isn't a grind this in a coffee grinder, mix it with lemon juice and chug the thing, right? This is like, we're chewing this dried component.
You're having a full meal.
And I remember I got chipmunk cheeks, and Tosh looks at me and she's like, "This is a lot of mushrooms." And I was like, no, knowing full well, like, I don't think I've ever eaten this much, but I can't say that now to her. It's her first time, I was like, this is totally fine, and it was the case. We were in the safest container. That land is untouched. There's no running water. There's no electricity. It is untouched land. It's not like there's casinos and stupid shit. It's just, it is untouched pure land. And, we went through the sweat right after having psilocybin. Also, a lot of people would say, the sweat's its own ceremony. You never take medicine in the sweat. And I say there's tradition, sure. And there's a time to break tradition. And the experiences that we had where we combined them were like nothing else. Nothing else. And Tosh she's such a free spirit, but she's pitch black. She's small. She's dancing in there. She's on her ass, because it's you got to sit down. You can't move around. She's just arms moving and just fully on the medicine. And we came out. It was a full moon, and like it felt like we were on the moon. Like that's how zoomed in everything was. We went for a little walk, and she had 2 foxes following her. She's like fucking Cinderella, like that deep of connection to nature, and it ended up being an incredible experience. But that was my coach. He was a guy who liked me. He could read it, not for everybody, but with the right people, he was going to go pedal to the metal and say like, all right, you're ready for this experience. And I appreciate that about him because he was one of the first people to viscerally show me, like I learned this from my strength coach at ASU, like whatever glass ceiling I've imagined is there, it isn't there. And my strength coach would just fucking grind me through whatever breaking point I thought I had, and I'd somehow make it through it and be like, wow, I'm stronger now. Wow, I have way more endurance than I thought I did. How is that? And I was like, oh, that shit was make-believe, And that's one of the beautiful things about psilocybin is that there is no real ceiling on how high it goes. And a lot of people, like maybe my dad, who's had pretty profound experiences with it, and me, he's like, surely it stops working at a certain point. I'm like, no, that's not what Kalindi says, and that's not what I've experienced on big stuff. But I don't know if that answers your question on the first experience, but he was really the guy that got me into it. We worked with psilocybin primarily, and then eventually I had a friend go to Peru, and I learned about ayahuasca. I said, hey, will you come with me to Peru? I don't speak Spanish. And he said, we'll bring Peru to us, and brought a couple of curanderos in, and I had about 12 journeys with Aya then on that reservation, and that really showed me so much more. Like it confirmed many teachings in the East of animism, and that's teachings of all indigenous for that matter, but so much of as above, so below, everything, whatever's animating me, whatever consciousness is my soul animates all things. It's in the trees, it's in the grass, it's in the ground, it's fucking everything, right? Like, whoa, like we're all one, like that kind of thing. But like the visceral knowing of that, the visceral remembering of that in an undeniable way. So I credit ayahuasca for so much, but I also taught me how to work with psilocybin more appropriately. Like if I can speak to this consciousness, surely I can speak to these little fungi, these honguitos, and I'm going to have a dialogue in that way. And that really set the stage for my ability and capability to be a psychonaut and start to work with plant medicines differently,
It's amazing, dude. What an incredible story. And I took a couple notes, I think what's really good about your coach is that he was relatable, right? And this is what I love about, different maestros and shamans I meet is like, yeah, they still have their vices sometimes, they still have their things, and that's what makes them relatable. Because if you put people on a pedestal and they try to seem like Jesus Christ or whatever, and they're like, I have nothing wrong with me, then it's kind of like shaky, right? You go into experience kind of like, how do I even relate to this person? So that was cool. And, it's funny you mentioned combining the medicine into the Temescal Sweat Lodge and that type of thing, because when I was combining cannabis and Tai Chi, which I call High Chi, because again, playing words too, but not too, all right, I was like, I figured out the pun first. The pun is what told me I had to make a system around it. Like, I figured out the pun and I was like, I gotta do it. And so like, when I was looking up online research of people combining cannabis or other medicines into Qigong and Tai Chi, it was ridiculous. People were like, you never combine anything, it's sacrilege, all this stuff. I'm like, well, hey, I'm combining it and getting some pretty cool results. And so I think that's where we can, of course, tradition, like you were saying, is important. But also, if we want to bring this to the world, we're going to have to make it relatable a little bit. People don't have the most time in the world to go, through a lot of Temescal Sweat Lodges. They don't necessarily have the time to go through a lot of Tai Chi before they start getting the picture. So if you can show them something like that with a medicine added and they go, oh, this is what that does. Now they're able to go back sober and know what the experience is. And that gets directly into my last note, which was the idea that I have is knowing versus realizing. Knowing is being able to describe it. Realizing it is experiencing. And I think that's one of the big challenges going on right now in society, especially even with psychedelics, right? Is people are learning a lot about them. But like I always say, you can learn about what a hamburger is. You can learn about what it tastes like, what the constituents of it are. But eventually, if you want to know what a hamburger is, you're just going to have to go eat one, you know? And I think that's one of the big challenges we see right now is a lot of people getting PhDs, piled higher and deeper, as Paul says, but lacking in direct experience, you know? Yeah. And it's a funny thing, man. It's a really funny thing. Hey everybody, I hope you're enjoying the show. I wanted to take a quick moment to let you all know that the doors are officially open for the Conscious Cannabis Collective. And as such, this is the last week you can sign up and receive all of the bonuses we're currently including. This is the last time I will be personally onboarding those of you who sign up with a complimentary one-on-one session, and you'll have the ability to get the Grow with Cannabis course for free during this limited time. For more info on how you can take advantage of this offer, head down to the show notes for this episode and secure your spot today, as we only have so many spots left and they are filling up quickly. Now back to the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Ted Decker, who's a Christian mystic and a buddy of mine, anonymous, wrote 49th Mystic and Rise of the Mystics. Same thing. He used the avocado.
Yeah.
You fucking paint that thing. You can sculpt it. You could be the best linguist describing it in multiple languages, and you don't know it until you eat it. That's how you know the avocado.
Exactly. And one thing I wanted to talk to you about, because you were mentioning these larger doses, specifically with psilocybin. And I know I've heard some stories through you and Paul, I believe, taking these heroic doses. Now, when people might hear heroic dose, they think of 5 grams. But I don't even know what to call this size dose of like 30 grams, I believe it was, right?
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that, and also like what you find in these macro doses. Like what leads you to that? Is it something that just comes out, you don't really know why, or was there like a specific awareness you gained that told you like, yeah, the bigger doses and I get along? Because again, psychedelics in general are not for everyone. Definitely big doses like that are not for everyone. But what made them right for you? What have you experienced with them?
Yeah, that's a great question. The disclaimer I give people is that I've had countless journeys on very little that gave me more trackable, usable things. Like my life changed more from the 3 to 5 gram dose than probably any other dose. You know, with 7 being an exception. I've had some really profound experiences with 7 grams that really shifted what my day to day looked like. You know, up until that point, I'd probably had a handful of mostly 5 to 7 gram doses. I had a couple where we split an ounce, you know, that kind of thing. And with lighter versions of psilocybin, you know, that I also, you know, had been to the Amazon. We had a kid at that point. We had a little bear, and I wanted to go back to the Amazon and having that level of transformative experience. Ayahuasca was so much more visually, and the depth of which was so much more than my psilocybin journeys at 5 to 7 grams at that point. And not to compare, but I remember asking ayahuasca, like, how do I take this home with me? I'm never going to drink ayahuasca alone without a curandero. How can I have an experience like this? Like, what do I have permission to do? And I saw this in black background, golden mushroom sprout out of the black. And I was like, are you telling me to take psilocybin? I was like, whoa, okay. And I was like, well, what is it? And it showed the 3, 5, 7, and it stopped there, which is what I've done, right? And then I saw 9, 11, 13, so like every 2 grams going up. And I had never put that into practice, but I always found it fascinating that ayahuasca gave me the green light to start climbing the ladder with psilocybin. And due to circumstance, time, not really setting aside everything to have a ceremony that big. The beautiful thing about Aya is, like, if I'm leaving the country for 8 days, I'm going to be on dieta for a month before. I'm going to make sure I'm not watching TV or listening to books. I'm going to get real quiet and real still and in my center and treat that ceremony for what it is. Whereas psilocybin on the weekend, sometimes I don't give it that level of respect. And I had a member who I'm super close with from Fit for Service, Carrie, who actually worked very closely with. She's my boss at the farm, in the hierarchy of things. And brilliant lady. And she sent me this, you know, have you ever heard of this? And it was a video of Kalindi Ai, who recently passed away. And his whole deal was, you know, for 20 years, he had taken 20 to 30 grams of psilocybin. And my knee-jerk reaction was, fuck this guy. He's a fucking hack.
Yeah.
Nobody takes that much. It's fucking stupid. Like, it actually bothered me. Like, don't waste my time with this stupid shit. Nobody does that. I listen to Terrence McKenna. Who the fuck is this guy? And then after I sent that text, I was like, like something felt off. And I was like, am I wrong about him? I don't know him. That was a knee-jerk reaction. I was like, let me watch this video she sent. So I watched a video. I rabbit hole like 3 of his videos. They're fantastic. They're still all up on YouTube. He has like the birth of the Marvel Universe, 30-minute video about these 2 guys. Not to go off topic, but it is a fucking cool story.
Topic.
1970s, Stan Lee takes a step back and starts producing and not writing, and gives these 2 young authors the ability to shape the future of Marvel Comics. They both live in a high-rise apartment in New York City, and both start experimenting with high-dose acid and high-dose psilocybin. And what they birth is the multiverse, the Infinity Stones, fucking everything you see in the movies right now. Doctor Strange came from these guys. Guardians of the Galaxy came from these guys. And then how they interweave them, and everything that's done before, right? You saw in the most recent Spider-Man how they had all 3 Spider-Mans, right? Like, how do you weave that together? So these guys found a way through the multiverse, to include and transcend everything that had been done before them, and then create something new with it, right? So fucking that in and of itself, you talk creativity with medicine, like that to me, whether you like it, some people are like, I don't watch comic movies, like, and then understand that they sat on those movies for that long. They're like, hey, we're gonna make some money doing movies like original Spider-Man, things like that, Fantastic Four, which was a bomb, but for the big ones, for the Avengers, we're going to sit and wait until the CGI is good enough that we can actually make the art the way we envision it. And they fucking held on to these gems for that long. And now what you see on it, you're like, damn. Wow. That is a long, slow play, right?
Yeah, talk about delayed gratification.
Yeah, it's so cool. But listening to Kalindi, I realized very quickly, he's more grounded than most people I meet in ayahuasca circles. And he's had these heroic doses, like truly massive doses, beyond heroic. And, lifelong martial artist. He understands the history of African psychedelics very well. And really just a fascinating guy. And it piqued my interest, and I really sat and meditated that night. I went to sleep on it, and I felt like he was giving me permission. Paul uses that term quite a bit, right? Yeah. I felt like I was getting permission from him. And really started to sit with it. And one thing he says, another disclaimer, is that you go up 2 grams at a time. So for me to appropriately have followed the protocol, I would have had 17 grams. Because 15 was my highest dose before that. I wouldn't have jumped to 30. And another thing, there are no mistakes, but I had reason to believe that the mushrooms I was sitting on were not penis envy, because they were much smaller. They didn't look like the phallic symbol. I didn't realize that they had been harvested before they were full size, which actually potentiates them. And they were fucking penis envy. I found that out doing 15 grams of those later, and having compared that to Golden Teacher, some other strains, is like, oh wow, that 30 grams, because they had nothing to compare it to. That was 30 grams of penis envy. I fasted the whole day for 24 hours. I got in the sauna, the ice bath. I did yoga. I shook it out, Kundalini, did breath work. I did everything to ground myself and pull me into my body, but also to potentiate myself. Jews like to potentiate the mitochondria, so it chew right through it. And I grind up to 30 grams, and Kalindi would eat them, but I'm like, no, man, I've done half of that before I had time to do that. So I ground it up, threw it in with water, left it in a shaker cup for like 20 minutes so it would really rehydrate and absorb. And I slowly chewed this down. And it started at 8:30 and ended right at midnight on the dot. So it was a 3.5-hour ride that was completely out of body, on par with 5-MeO, or the most heroic hit of NN-DMT. And I just finished the DMT dialogues with, Graham Hancock, Rupert Sheldrake, all the who's who, Dennis McKenna. And one of the things that Rick Strassman, who did all the work on DMT out of New Mexico, was saying was like, we have to figure out a way to extend the DMT window. And the first thought I had was, that's it, dude. It's a 3.5-hour DMT trip. Like, there could be no denying it.
Yes.
And that was a fucking profound experience. We can dive into that too, but really, like, that blew the doors off. And it showed, one of the things that Kalindi talked about is, like, all these medicines have the ability to heal. Ayahuasca can heal you. Iboga can heal you. They can work on psychic trauma. They can work on emotional trauma, sexual trauma. They can work on addictions. They can do a lot of work, right? But at a certain point, when you've done the healing work, it's about exploration. And that's really what DMT Dialogues is diving into, is like, how do we explore? How can I get out there, talk with consciousness, a higher evolved consciousness, that's willing to communicate with me, right? That's an important one. And then bring that back and bring it back home and actually use it to change humanity's course.
Yes.
Right? So he was asking for those with enough skill to navigate those waters and actually become the explorers on the psychedelic frontier. Like, sign me the fuck up. So that was the birth of me going to that depth.
It's amazing, man, because, I think I imagine Cole Whitty. I had her on the show back, I think, when the show started. And she was saying that one time she took, I think, 10 or 11 grams, and she said that, like, it came to her in a dream, and her like, physical self, right, ego, whatever you want to call it, was like, I don't know, but there was a deeper voice saying, do it, right? And it sounds like that same kind of like permission slip type thing that you were chatting about. And I think that's so profound, because I think for a lot of people listening, this shows a couple things. One, logic is not going to be what gives you your dose, right? Like, at least all the time. Maybe when you first start and you're not like aware of this world, but there's a certain point in which logic just does not actually comprehend. The second thing too is that if you're not attuned to your intuition, well, then you could get yourself into slippery slopes and in some mucky water with, like, going into something like mushrooms with the same mindset as alcohol, right? Which is, how much can I drink? How much can I get fucked up? Because these things.
Good luck if you're in it for a pissing contest.
Yeah, exactly. Like, have fun with that. Because what I believe in, what I've experienced firsthand is that these entities, they will check you. Like, they'll check you before you wreck yourself. And I think that, like, one of the first times for me was when I made an 18-gram tea with a couple buddies. And, logic told me, oh, that'll be 6 grams each. I've done 5. That should be fine. First mistake was not realizing they were penis envy and not understanding that, just like cannabis, different mushrooms have different contents of psilocybin in them. Second thing was very similar to you. They were smaller, so a lot of them were aborts, which are actually much stronger because they have all the psilocybin in this very small dose. So obviously I didn't know what I know now. This was like when I was 22, 23. We make this tea and we drink it. And we're blasting off, and I'm laughing at something, and all of a sudden, I have this reaction that I'm choking, I ate mold, and my throat's closing up, and I'm dying. All happened in like a split second. It was like a knowing. It wasn't even like, is that real? Like, it was like, no, this is real. So I go try to puke it up, nothing will come up. I'm having like a straight, like, my ego is meeting source. It's getting closer and closer, right? And then at a certain point, I finally go, fuck it. I like, if I was going to die, I probably would have already died. In that moment, I felt like the most cosmic laughter, not at me, but with me, of that entity in the mushroom world, essentially saying, we had to check you before you wreck yourself. Now go lay in bed and get some cool visuals, right? So I lay down in bed, and I had my first, like, true hallucination experience where I'm laying there for hours, probably like a good 2 hours. And I'm laying there, and I think my hands are like this, right? I'm convinced my hands are like that. I'm just
under your face.
Yeah, and I'm just traveling the astral realm, just having a blast. I go to move, and my hand is down here. So I go to move, expecting it to move here, and it's down there, and I'm like, whoa, right? So that proprioception really kicked in of like, where the hell am I? But it's so interesting because what I found was that what I was speaking to these entities about when I was there, where they were like, your math doesn't exactly equate on this side. Right? They were like, you think that you can take 18 grams and split it up and each person gets a 6-person dose. But what they were saying that I choose to believe because I experienced it was that if you take 18 grams, you're blowing an 18-gram hole in the universe, if you will, and then you're all going through that same hole, right? So you're all in this shared experience together because you're boiling that tea together. So it made a lot of sense. And of course, I've never taken a dose, like a high tea like that again. I've done like 10-gram teas with Rachel, which, another thing I'd like to talk to you about that actually just brings that up is the interaction of things like 5-MeO-DMT with other medicines. And I'll tell you how I found this out. I found this out completely fucking by accident. I had done combo, then 5-MeO-DMT, and then a week later, I came home and every Valentine's Day, me and Rachel do a 10-gram tea. And it's like our yearly thing that we do. So it just happened as a week after. So I didn't, I think there's a lot more research needed around 5-MeO because I've seen it potentiate a lot of things, both positive and negative things. Yeah, same with combo, exactly.
Yeah.
And so we ended up going into this experience, and it was like we ate 30 grams of mushrooms. I mean, I can't say that necessarily because I've never done it, but it was so deep, and they weren't penis envies either, that she got straight stuck in a loop. She was just stuck in this loop of let go and trust you can have whatever you want. And I think it was exactly what she needed for 4 hours. That's all she could think. And so here she is, right? So she's sitting up in my bed. I'm laying down in my bed. And I have this, like, she's just speaking to herself, like, under her breath. I can hear her whispering. I have no idea what she's saying. I'm going in and out of consciousness. So then what happens is I have this whole story that I can't cry, right? Ever since my father passed, I hadn't had a good cry. So I was like trying to force this cry all throughout the last 7 years, right? Now here I am, just completely surrendered, laughing my ass off, and all of a sudden I get this download. Laughter is a lot like crying reimagined. The second I say that, all of a sudden I feel this like, this cracking, and I just start sobbing, right? For like a good hour, just complete sobbing. Meanwhile, she's sitting up, and I couldn't tell, because again, I'm tripping, couldn't tell if she was looking at me, the room was dark, but to me, I'm like, oh my God, Rachel, you're holding such amazing space. And she'd be like, huh, what? Oh yeah, sure, thank you. She had no idea what she was doing. I'm like, you're a God to me. Like to me, she's doing these spells that are allowing me to cry. She's moving energy. She's doing all this stuff. It wasn't until I come out of that after I start talking to my wall for about an hour, because it was like some entity that I was just like crying, and my cat was in there and I met him, and just like, it was just the most beautiful experience ever. We start coming out, and finally she starts touching ground, and she's like, what the hell has been happening for the last 4 hours? I'm like, oh my God, Ray, do you remember? I'm like, you held space for me. You did all this stuff. She's like, what are you talking about? I didn't do any of that. She's like, you cried? I don't even remember. And I'm like, oh, right. So like, it was just that hilarious experience. But I realized that there was some interaction between 5-MeO and then interacting with psilocybin after that led to that. And I imagine you have some experience in those realms with 5 and then other medicines after. And I feel this is really important, because for people out there, they might not know this is a thing. And this is one of the best things to understand, especially with 5-MeO and Bufo getting more popularity. If you're going to interact with that moving forward, like to take a break from other medicines if you don't want to have another grandiose experience. So I'm curious if you could speak to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first let me say that to backtrack just a second, 30 grams was amazing. It really helped me organize. And one of the reasons it was amazing is because it was easily the hardest experience I've ever had in my life. The first portion, there's no way to track time in that realm, but the first portion was pure light, Christ consciousness, Buddha consciousness, whatever the fuck you want to call that, right? Like I was floating in a sea of euphoria and asking questions and having all the downloads come through. We had lost a child through miscarriage in between Bear and Wolf, and I was asking about Wolf, is she safe now, while my wife was pregnant during that 30 grams, and the answer was like a resounding yes. She is safe, she is ready, you guys are ready, and that's why she's coming now. And then I remember this wormhole came out from the wall, and I could see beings at my feet. And I'd never seen aliens on DMT or anything else, but here they are, eyes wide open. I'm like, holy shit. And they're like speaking this weird clicking language, like I don't understand. They
like
touch me, and I could feel this ball of love move through me. Anywhere they touched, I could feel a ball of love, and then I would have some vision or something transpire after that. But this dark wormhole comes off the wall from Mandala. And I'm looking into it. I'm like, what the fuck is this? And it's sitting on my chest, and it's separating the rest of the room, like a glass of water that's full. And you see this little rim around the outside. And I can see the rest of the room just fine. I can see them at my feet. And I look in, and it just looks pitch black. And having read DMT dialogues, I'm like, oh, that's the darkness. And they say, if you have the opportunity to learn from Satan, do so. If you have the opportunity to run into the demon, don't run away and fucking say, get me out of here. You're going to miss out on the medicine. So immediately that question pops up. Can I go into the darkness? And I say, yes. Now, I don't remember after that anything that had happened before then. And I go through 5 layers. I wrote them down, 5 layers of different aspects of hell, which for me, and there's 2 reasons I'll use hell. One, hell is a personal thing. It's not some guy in a red suit poking me in the ass. There was no fire and brimstone. But it becomes torture because it's the thing you're most afraid of that happens. And it would happen again and again and again and again. And so I would watch. It started off with me drinking the tea right in the beginning, first layer. And I can telepathically communicate because I'm on mushrooms. I understand that I'm on mushrooms. So I talk to everyone that's been a part of our health journey. I talked to Paul, talked to Rob Wolf, talked to our functional medicine doctor, and I talked to the baby. Oh, everyone's fine. Everyone's good. And I let them all know everything's going great. I'm checking in on her. And then, like these red lights flash, and I fucking run in to her room, and she looks at me like, you did this, and just explodes blood all over. And this is, it sounds gross right now. It was more visceral than a fucking real life. Wow. Like I had blood shooting my fucking mouth. Like it was disgusting and horrific, like worse than any horror story, right? Then I drink 30 grams and fucking play the exact same thing over and over again. It wasn't until I'd gone through it enough where I'm like, holy shit, this is a loop. And then I'd have fear I'm stuck in hell for eternity. And it was only when I'd come to grips with that where I'd be like, fuck it, she explodes, the earth explodes, I am consciousness itself, it's over. Once I had truly released all that, then I'd move to the next layer. And I moved from things that I consciously feared, like I knew I was afraid of that, to things that were unconscious fears, like where AI has already happened, and much like humanity, the super intelligent AI desires to know its creation story, just like we want to know our creator. And so as AI, I'm playing out the sequence of events that lead to the birth of AI so I can figure out how I was created. Right? Like shit like that, And it's funny, I talking about it, it's like that would make for a good movie. I moved through fears that I had, I moved through fears that I didn't have, or didn't know I had, right? But at the end of that, it was like a report card. Like, okay, and because I had fully released that shit, I was able to actually sit with it and see it objectively and be like, oh wow, that was background noise in my day-to-day. There was a program running in the back of my mind that influenced decisions. It influenced how I responded to things. It influenced my mood and my behavior. Because everything does, right? But especially if that's innate, and it was, that's an important thing to look through. It's the fucking hardest thing I've ever done, but it was very important. Fast forward a year, and I had the opportunity to be initiated with 5-MeO, which is typically 125 to 150 milligrams, which is a fucking whopper. Mm-hmm. And the way they do it is they slow your breathing, and you actually stand for the initiatory dose and raise your arms. You have someone behind you to catch you, and you have someone in front of you holding the medicine with a pipe and a torch. And as you raise your arms, you do what? You lengthen your lungs. So you can actually take more in, right? Then you stand with your arms at your side and hold it in until you're gone. And so they had actually lowered my dose to 100 milligrams because I had just done combo. I had done 2 or 3 sessions of combo and was completely clean. And they're like, trust me, this 100 is going to be more than most people's 150. And up until that point, every experience, I had probably maybe 15 journeys with the Sonoran Desert Toad 5-MeO, and all of them were like dissolving into a star, dissolving into unconditional love, pure euphoria, pure bliss, pure whatever, Christ conscious, whatever you want to call that, like God's eternal love. There was never a sticking point. There was kind of like, oh shit, I'm going to leave my body. But then once I was gone, it was like, wow, this is the fucking, everyone and their mom needs to try this. Like, there's nothing like this, And just pure bliss, nothing challenging at all. And so before this journey, they say, with these doses, and even smaller doses, you can have reactivations. And I was like, reactivations? You mean like what Norm Macdonald was joking about? Like I could fucking just all of a sudden be right back into 5-MeO land? And they started laughing. They're like, yeah. I was like, when? And they're like, well, it's not while you're driving a car or doing anything consciously, but if you meditate or right before bed at night. And I was like, cool. So I have this experience dissolving into God, and fucking when I meditate from now on, I'll just dissolve right back into God. Like, fucking sign me up.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, fuck yeah. And never having had a bad experience, challenging experience with that medicine. And then that night, I got stuck in a loop immediately, and it was a challenging experience. It was fucking beyond challenging. And I don't want to rabbit hole too much, but I will give one example. Like the loop started of me laying down and the practitioner putting his hand on my heart saying, that's it, just breathe. Then they light their microdose to tune into you. So I hear lighters going off, torches going off, and then one of the practitioners purges for me on my behalf. And then that's it, just breathe. Click with the torch, like for an innumerable amount of times, right? And I'm like, I'm stuck here. And they always have you they recommend a second microdose to help you process what you learned in the first one. So finally I come out of this and I'm like, fuck man, all right, well, maybe it'll help me process. So I have that microdose. It brings me right back to the start. And I'm like, no! What's worse than hell? Thinking you're going to get out and then saying yes, because my constitution is to say yes to the second dose and the third and the fourth for fucking infinity, and I'm never getting out of here, right? So,
you're like time paradox.
Yeah, the time, the chronos, man. There's no bueno at all. And then finally towards the end, I was like, well, if it does end, then it should be up pretty soon. And if I come back, I never have to do that again. And I will be so grateful for this 3D. And so sure enough, the music ends, lights go on, and they're like, how was it? They're all smiling. And I'm like, that was the fucking worst experience of my life. It didn't even make sense.
Yeah.
Like the hell on 30 grams made sense to me.
Yeah.
This I can make no sense of. And, I eat dinner, I feel fine, everything's cool. Hours later, drive home, and sober as a cucumber. I get back and tell Tasha about the experience, and she's like, I don't know, man, it doesn't sound cool. And I was like, yeah, man, I've never heard anyone have an experience like that on 5-MeO. Lay down to go to sleep, and somewhere in between falling asleep and not, somewhere in the twilight phase, no joke, I can feel the pressure of my lungs at full capacity, holding a fresh fucking hit of 5-MeO in and pushing it up to my brain, and the spiral starts, and the full vibration, I mean, to the T of what that feels like. Not halfway there, all the way there. And I remember just screaming, no! And I fucking jerked myself out of bed. I'm like, fucking heart racing. I mean, full on PTSD. I didn't sleep for 3 days. And no sleep will cause you to hallucinate. I'm not talking about having visions. I'm talking about like worried they're out to get me. They're triangulating every helicopter. You're like fucking Goodfellas. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's that bad. And then finally, I just had to surrender to it. And as I started sleeping, the reactivations were still there. And I would enter all fucking sorts of new realms of hell. Shit that I didn't even know existed. Like the puking realm, where I would just be afraid of purging in front of everybody. Like, oh no, I'm going to do it. And then but I'm in space, so it just floats, and then it slowly comes back to my face, and I have no arms, and I can't get away from it, and now I fucking eat it. I eat my own vomit, right? On the other end, I'm not gonna get too gross, but if you can imagine the level of disgust, and that's really what it was pressing on. Like, oh, is this gross you out? Let's have more of that. Oh, does it still gross you out? Let's have more of that. Is this disgusting? Let's play there for a while. Black belt level shit that really, for a minute there, did destroy me. It wasn't that it could have destroyed me. It was destroying me. It was destroying my ability to parent. It was destroying my ability to be a partner to my wife. And in every sense of the word, I remember talking to Ari and people about it. Like, no one had any sense of what to do. Like, a lot of my friends were had serious concern. And this is what a lot of people, to a lesser degree or to a greater degree, this is what people say. Like, it isn't for everybody. Even the most experienced people can be left fractured from an experience like that. And if you don't have the tutelage or the whereabouts to actually get help, the right help, not going to fucking see some shrink somewhere, like real help, right? Like a real shaman that's been there on that side of the coin, then you're done. And in many ways, what I was dealing with was Tico. You talk about Paul Levy. It was he describes malignant, or he describes it as me disease, malignant agoraphrenia. So one of the big mind fucks was, instead of we're all one consciousness of the same source, experiencing itself, here to know thyself in a beautiful way, it was everything I see right now is Maya the illusion, and it's a figment of my imagination because I can't stand being alone with myself. Right? It was fucking gnarly. So I'm looking at my son, who's the love of my life. You don't exist. I'm looking at my wife, who's the fucking my person. Man. And finally, she convinced me to call Paul, and I'm like, I was feeling so fucking nervous about it. I don't want to fucking bother him. And she's like, call him. You need it. And I wrote him, and I was like, hey, I'm in a fucking pickle. He's like, hey, buddy, how's it going?
Like, it's going all right, I guess.
I was like, it's so good to hear your voice, And I wrote him some texts, and then he's like, well, I'm pretty busy now, but I can call you Friday. It's Christmas Eve. Calls me on Christmas Eve. Spends 3 hours on the phone on Christmas Eve. And he's like, I've been there. And I was like, I don't disbelieve you, but please explain it.
Elaborate, please.
Yeah, and he said the first time he had an experience like that, he had 80 milligrams of synthetic 5-MeO, not realizing that organic bufo is about 10% 5-MeO, milligram per milligram. So 80 milligrams is fucking 4 times what I did.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, Paul, you take the cake, buddy. Yeah. And since then, he's had 2 more kids. He's fucking written books. He's Paul, right? Yeah. So I knew it panned out for him, and it can pan out for me. And that really was something that helps me settle down. And, so much paradox in that fucking experience that people can experience. And if you don't have the wherewithal, I certainly didn't. One of the first things I said to Paul was like, this is how Watiko responds is, whatever spiritual truth or understanding you have, it shows you that equal and opposite is true. And I told Paul that. I was like, it's like everything that I've held as true and worthwhile is inverted. you know, and like, or I look at something I despise, like a pedophile, and it's taught Twamacy, I am that too. And I'm like, what the fuck? No, you know? And he said, well, you know, the way mine works, and obviously his new book is going to really break this down. That is such a gem and such a privilege to be able to read as he's writing it. He does discuss that. The function of the mind is a relationship function. It's an I-thou function, which can only exist in polarity. Right? So like that understanding fundamentally shifted, like, wow, okay. And that's why the Tao cannot be spoken. Because anything you say about the Tao, the equal and opposite is true. So like those hard truths are shit that I had to grapple with. And without them, I'd be fucking dead. There's no two ways about it. I actually had a vision during one of the nights where I blew my fucking brains out. And of course, the second I shot myself in the head, spiraled further into darkness. It wasn't the end, it was the beginning. And now I didn't have a body to go home to and make pretend with. So there was no exit strategy. There was no off button, you know, until I really came to terms with it. And you know, now, like, why would that be valuable? Probably not valuable for 99.99% of people, but for me, my appreciation for the 3D has never been higher. My appreciation for the gift that we have here, whether it is the illusion or not, like Paul says, is the illusion.
Yes.
It's not the illusion, it's the game, it's the illusion, right? And to have that level of respect and to understand, anytime anybody who's done a good enough dose of psychedelics, the idea that this is intelligent design is so undeniable. You know, it's so remarkable that we can see each other and the gift and love of our differences. You know, the diversity, like if everyone is the same, you fucking lose your mind. Yes, trust me, you will lose your fucking mind if you believe that these are all non-player characters in your video game.
Yes.
Gary fucking T.
Yes.
You know, so the spelling with Tico really helped, and Paul, you know, was a godsend there. But I think for most people, you know, I would play with microdoses with 5-MeO, you know, with respect. I say play, but respectfully use that as a microdose level. I'll never go that high again with that medicine ever. And I say that with gratitude and respect because so much of that was the undeniable truth of God's love for me, right? And I can't take any of those experiences away from me. But knowing that also exists there, right? Like knowing that you can. One of the things I got recently on a walk, and then I'll shut up and let you continue correcting this. But one of the things I got really like last week walking this farm was part of the issue. It was gratitude for the ego, right? Unless you are the totality of consciousness, which they talk about in the Kabbalion. You can say you're God, but you are not the all consciousness, right? You don't have that level of awareness. Don't pretend that you do. You're not the thing. You're not the whole fucking thing, right? Exactly. So get that out of your head. Big G, little O, little D, right? As Paul would say, you're not all caps, right? So, but to dissolve into the all caps, you have no I to experience it, right? And Paul talks about that too, which is kind of a mind fuck. You can get a taste of it, right? And then come back with a taste of it. But when you dumb down the ego so much that your periphery and everything, you take on all information at the same time, you become everything. You become the pedophile. You become the fucking all, from an esoteric standpoint, not from a fucking absolute 3D standpoint, but you become those things. And to walk a mile in those shoes, that is fucking hard sailing, dude. Absolutely hard sailing, right? Like to connect to each aspect of life and to not understand it, but to just be it, that's pretty fucking hard. And I think the I that is the ego is such a valuable piece in intelligent design. It's not a fucking mistake. We're not here to eviscerate that thing, right? We're here to come in right relation with that thing and not let it direct our lives, but we're damn sure not to eviscerate that thing. There is no experience without it.
Yeah, I'm so glad you bring that up because we hear these things, ego death, and typically it's like that very, I don't want to say immature masculine, but like that kind of like same mentality as the gym. Let's just go fucking crush it, no pain, no gain. Let's fucking kill this ego. And I was talking to Hamilton about this too because I believe exactly what you and Paul have talked about and everything, where the ego is my best friend because it's what allows me to have this illusion of separation, to play this game. And I think that what I've realized in doing 5-MeO as well, because I've done it twice and that was all I needed. That second experience was like so far out that it was impossible to contextualize it, right? So that's what I was talking about with cannabis in your episode. Like you can microdose that, you're getting taste of it, but you don't have to become the all, so you still have the ego to actually be like, whoa, what does this mean for my life? But when you go there completely, it's really hard to try to piece that together. It's like a dream, right? You might be able to remember right off the bat, but if you don't write some things down, you're going to forget it. Even if you do write things down, you go back later and you're like, is that even me that wrote that? Like, I don't remember that at all. So it's really hard to contextualize. So what I think is so cool is that, talking about this idea of the ego is exactly what I've come to realize is that, like, I'm so grateful for this experience, right? Like I was also saying in your show, like, this to me is the gem. This is the jackpot, getting to be here and have this physical experience as a human being. And not only that, but to be a human being, I think is to be an ethereal extreme sporter. Because think about it, right? You could be a bird, you could be any things, but our soul's set up to be humans. What does that mean about our soul? Like, what kind of crazy shit is that thing experienced that it decided to be a fucking human? It was so, like, not bored, maybe is the right term, but like so ready to be like, let's just go play all out, that it was like, I'm going to be a human being. So I'm going to have the illusion of separation. I'm going to have this knowing that that is a separation. I'm going to have emotions, all these other people's emotions that are also just reflections of me. So every time I point a finger, three are pointing back. It's like such a psychedelic experience. And that's what I was saying. And I'm so glad we came full circle to this, where life itself is a psychedelic. Kids know that without actually being able to, they realize it without knowing it, right? So they're not like, Dad, this is a really psychedelic experience we're on here, right? But like, they're able to go talk to imaginary friends, right? You give a kid like a bucket and a shovel, and they're going to be able to go out in the yard and have fun all day because they're able to be connected to their intuitive nature. They're not trying to know everything, right? They're kind of in like the sweet spot. And I think that, what I realized in my own life was the first half of my life was learning how to quote unquote fit into society. Then the second half has been actually coming back into the mind of the child and realizing that, like, whoa, I'm so grateful for my experiences with psychedelics, but I'm also equally grateful for when my feet touch the ground again. Because I've had some experiences where I didn't know if my feet were going to touch the ground again. And like those experiences where, like, I don't know if I'm ever going to see my mom again, my girlfriend, I don't know if I'm ever going to have my friends around again. Like, coming back, the immense amount of gratitude that I feel and being like, wow, Ram Dass was right, be here now. It's great to go journey when you feel the call, but also, like, remember that, like, you're here right now, right? You have infinity to soar there, but it's important to be here now. And I think that's so important to remember, because if we don't, then we risk having experiences like that, which again, we could say that experience was right for you, right? So there's no way to go back and try it the other way and see if it was actually happening for you, whatever. Duality is just a concept made in the mind anyway. But I think that for a lot of people, they might have that experience without your knowledge, right? Without the awareness and people like Paul and things like that. And that's when you get into really slippery waters. And I think that, us being able to talk about these things, we have almost a duty and responsibility to share this with people, because if we don't, well, guess how many lawmakers are just waiting for the person that loses their mind to go, see, we told you psychedelics are bad. They're going to fuck your whole life up. So being able to talk about these things and show other people, like, hey, maybe you don't have to make the same choices we did, that luckily we had the tools to handle, but brought us right to our edges of our human experience. It's really powerful.
Okay.
So, man, this has been amazing. We've already gone almost an hour, and I got a couple last questions for you for the outro. So first, I want to ask you where people can find you. Of course, I'm sure they know. Everyone listening to this show is right in the check card and everything, but tell people where they can find you and any upcoming things you're really excited about that you got going on right now.
Yeah, brother, absolutely. I'm back on Twitter. Didn't lose my following, even though I got off social media entirely right before the pandemic. I'm back on social media because it's a double-edged sword, but it is the easiest way to communicate with people and stay in contact. At Kingsboo on Twitter, and then at Living with the Kingsburys is my joint family page on Instagram. And then Fit for Service app, you can sign up for that. You can get a lot of the downloads, and I post everything that I want to post on Earth there that would be taken down on the big platforms. So if you want to really get a follow and get to see like the shit that I'm reading and listening to and watching, that's a great way to stay up to date. We're running Fit for Service events. We have our first one coming up. Our last one of the year sold out in Sedona with a wait list, but this first one next year will be here in Lockhart at the farm early March, I think the 1st through the 5th. And that's going to be just incredible. You get to see what I'm doing here at the farm, exactly what we've been building, working on. We're going to be starting phase 2 in February, right before. And then right after that, we're going to have our first educational seminar with Chad Johnson and a couple other experts. So you get hands-on in the dirt. And that's going to be up on gardenersofeden.org, I believe, once we have that handle. We have the .com right now, but are waiting to launch the website until we get the org, because we are a 501(c) nonprofit. And but just check in with me online. Like, hey, dude, I want to come learn regenerative agriculture. I want to see what you guys are doing with food forests and what's food sovereignty all about and all that good shit. It's going to be a 5-day crash course on that stuff. So really awesome. I'm really excited for both those events because Fit and Service has been our bread and butter. It's our 5th year coming up. We've ironed out so many kinks, and we've grown, each of us, Aubrey, me, Gazi, Kaylin, we've grown so much as individuals during that time that really, what we offer and what we bring to the table from a community standpoint, I think is unsurpassed. And then getting into, what we're going to do with this farm and all that stuff, like there's few things that thrill me as much as this, because of the impact that it has, because of what potentially lies ahead. Control the food, control the world kind of deal. So I think having that ability to grow our own and at the very least have the very best, highest end raw milk, grass-fed, grass-finished, regenerative animals, and to let them till the land and work it for us, that's a really cool thing. So we get to watch this infancy here mature and manifest, and right now I think you can hear the tiger cat out back.
Yeah.
It's like the machine in Avatar. I was saying, I think the machine in Avatar that just destroys nature. Many people might have a problem with that, but that's how we're going to make this land movable. And it's funny, Daniel Griffith said that too. He was like, I think it's a very white thing to do, to just sit back and let an old forest die. There's no indigenous culture that didn't work with the forest, right? And that included controlled burns and included a lot of things, but that in fact frees the forest. And without bison here to eat saplings and rub their shoulders on branches, it's up to us to tend the land to actually make these trees that do stay more viable, healthier, and restore grasslands and restore the mycelial network and the sponginess of the soil and all that good stuff. So it's been a crash course for me to learn. And there's nothing better for me than getting my hands dirty. So that's the thing that's most inspiring for me right now.
Dude, I love that, man. Any time in history would be a good time to learn these things. But I think right now, like we were talking before, like worst case, you simply learn how to save money, eat higher quality food, and therefore be highly optimized, right? To drop the name. But I think that, best case scenario, or rather that'd be the best case. Worst case scenario, let's say food does get really fucky. Let's say all this stuff does get really fucky. Now you're set up with a skill set that not only you can do, but you can also teach other people to do too, and be able to actually allow life to continue thriving, right? Because all the things of meat and God knows all the other things.
Yeah, I don't want to be stuck on soylent and crickets.
Yeah, exactly.
My life.
Yeah, exactly.
My fucking kids. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
What nature gave us.
Yeah. It's in design. So my last question for you, Kyle, is this. Let's say someone listens to this conversation and they're extremely interested to look into psychedelics in their own life. What is the one piece of advice that Kyle Kingsbury would suggest to them to allow them to use the proper discernment in choosing whether psychedelics are right for them in their life?
I get this question a lot. I'm sure that's why you ask it at the end of the show. It's a great question. It's hard to say when the time is right because I didn't start with meditation. Ayahuasca taught me to meditate. I didn't start with yoga. Ayahuasca taught me to do yoga. And it kept teaching me that until I actually started.
Yeah.
3 ceremonies back to back to back where all I kept getting was the same information. I was like, why do you keep telling me this? I wrote that down. Like, you haven't started. You don't get to graduate to the new material until you actually do what I've asked.
Yes.
Like, heard. All right, I'm going to start doing that. People come to the altar with the most baggage, the most trauma, the most everything, or they don't. They come with business questions like, man, I don't like my job. Is this right for me? Or this relationship isn't going the way that I thought it would. Is this the right person to settle down with? In my opinion, there is no dumb question that you bring to the altar, and there is no wrong time to come. But you're only going to know that for yourself, and that doesn't require you to getting still in a quiet room to figure that out. The calling is one that speaks to you from the inside out. It's a felt experience. It moves beyond logic. It moves beyond what your friends say. It moves beyond, this trip to Soltara lines up with my work schedule and the kids are in school. It has nothing to do with that. The stars may line up in that way, but it really boils down to, is it persistent communication? Is it coming from the heart? Is it inside out? And if that's the case, then that's what's right for you. And if you want to really dive into what is the best medicine or this and that, again, take your thinking mind out of it. I recommend people go to Soltara just because it is very high level, possibly the highest level education that you're going to get. They do a 3-hour orientation before you drink the medicine. They fly in the curanderos from the Amazon. You don't have to go all the way to the Amazon, and anybody that's been to Lima knows, and Iquitos especially, I wouldn't send my wife there alone.
Yeah.
I would not send her there alone. If I'm there at 6'3" with a fighting background, we're cool. She's not going there alone. Costa Rica, different scenario. I'm happy to send her there. And, it is nice. Ayahuasca is hard in and of itself. It is nice having air conditioning in your room when you go to sleep at night and having your own shower. Soltara's done a beautiful thing. Dennis McKenna and many of the other greats on the Mount Rushmore, they're a part of that. They're all board members working with Dan Cleveland and Soltara. And I think, given my experience, and it's not the same for everybody, but my experience where ayahuasca was able to show me how to work with all medicines, I think it's a great place to start. Then if you want to microdose and things like that, cool. But at least know what that experience is. Have it expertly guided before you start doing your own solo journeys, and enter everything with respect and reverence.
Yes, dude, I love that. Hell yes to every single one of those things. Alrighty, guys. Trust me when I say that having the opportunity to have Kyle on the show and dive in with him on the unbelievable experiences he has had within this space, what these experiences have illuminated for him, and all of the other incredible topics we dove into today on the show is something I am eternally grateful for. It is individuals like Kyle who are helping to speak to not only the power and potency behind these medicines, but also to the respect and reverence they deserve. And by having these types of conversations, my hope is that those of you listening are able to go forth into your own lives with this knowledge and wisdom and apply it to your own experience to enact lasting positive change in your lives as a whole. For any of you who are looking to connect with Kyle and stay up to date on all of his newest podcast episodes, his work for Fit for Service, his work in sacred hunting, make sure to check out the show notes for this episode, where I will be laying out all of the easiest ways to take action on that today. Kyle, thank you so much for sharing your time, wisdom, and energy with the listeners and me on the show today, for doing the important work you are doing in the world to help others achieve an optimized state of mind, body, and spirit, and for being a prime example of what being the change we wish to seek in the world is embodied into the human form. And until next time, my brother, may your journey be smooth and full of light. Aho.